These are the secret camera designs of Agent 51. In my last report to you, we covered what I've been able to find on Agent 51's first falling plate camera, that large wooden box that I showed to you last time. I've found evidence of the early sketches for how he designed that. I've found evidence for a new kind of camera he built on a totally different principle. And I've found sketches for some of these. I've found the photographic evidence. I've actually found one of the cameras, and I have evidence that he built a second camera, but I can't find it. You know, covering Agent 51 has been a real challenge. This guy is real mysterious. I don't know what he was up to, but I'm going to keep dogging on his trail until I find everything I can on him. I know what you're thinking. Why did we have to come all the way out here to talk? Well, I don't think it's safe where we've been meeting. I think we had to find a safe house. So this is the best I could come up with, this little shed out here on the edge of suburbia. But I think it's going to be good for our meetings. Okay, I have this pile of stuff that I found on Agent 51 about his latest project that I've been able to uncover, this other camera idea. And let's go through the documentation and see what you think about it. When I was researching documentation for the falling plate camera that you saw in the last report, I had come up with these other designs that he made, and this is the earliest one in June of 1996. And it looks like he's using really large spools or cylinders of some kind, and he's wrapping photo paper around these spools, and I think he's taping the photo paper together into like a giant roll film camera. This particular design is using either a pinhole, or in some of the later designs he's using like a Fresnel lens, but here he's trying to figure out how to manage the tension on the spools, and he's coming up with some kind of a back tension system using rubber bands and some kind of a tension band, and it seems kind of complicated. I don't know if he built that. And then he has details of how to have a baffle plate where the film plane is that protects the light from fogging the film spools behind it. And that was in June of 96 also. Then he's trying to figure out how to do the frame counter, how to figure out how far to advance the reel of paper. And one of the ideas he came up with was having notches cut in a large roll of black paper, having the photo paper taped to the paper, kind of like a medium format system, but in large format size, and then using some kind of an electrical system with a switch that makes contact through the holes that lights up an LED light to indicate when you've advanced the film. Then again in June of 96, he's coming up with ways of trying to manage the back tension on the film spools so that it stays tight. Then, going forward to 1997, he has this idea of these large cylinders with paper wrapped around them, and they wrap around the back of the camera, and then in between the cylinders is the view for the pinhole. And there was also an idea for putting the cylinders behind the film plane instead of in front of the film plane. So he was working on both of them, and it looked like he was trying to figure out which one was more space efficient. And I think from his notes here, it looks like having the roll of paper behind the film plane makes the camera too big, whereas if you can fit it in between the reels, the camera's not as deep, although it might be a little wider. And then there's this one. This one is dated 1997, and apparently he's thinking about using 8 by 10 inch sheets of paper. So this is like a giant roll film camera on large 6-inch diameter spools, and the film wraps off the spool, runs around these rollers to the film plane, back to the other spool, and then he has this light baffle system that keeps the light from the pinhole from fogging the paper on the spools. And here is the image area right here. It looks like a 10-inch wide image area. So a really large roll film camera. So this is one of the documents I was able to come up that documented this paper roll film camera. And again, here's a second book, a sketchbook of Agent 51's. This is dated in May of '98, and he calls this a reel-to-reel pinhole camera. And it looks like he's using the two supply and take-up reels with paper negative roll, and I guess he has strips of paper taped together on the back side. But he has a flange up here, and then he has another thin strip of some material wound on there that acts like frame numbers. And the way I can tell down here is when the back of the camera slips on the camera, there is some kind of a light baffle that shields the light. So you have a viewing window where you can, like a red window, that you can view these numbers, but there's a light baffle around these flanges that keeps the light from that viewing window from actually hitting the paper. But as you advance the roll of paper, I guess the problem he was coming up with, as he was describing here, was as you advance the paper, the diameter of the reels change as the paper moves from one reel to the other. And so it makes it difficult to determine the film counter just based on the rotation of the reels, because the distance is constantly changing. So he wants to have numbers on a tape similar to a medium format where the numbers are on the back of the paper. And so he's using this one as a little strip adjacent to the main roll of paper as a way of keeping track of the exposures. And then in 1999 he has this idea for cameras that use plastic Fresnel lenses as viewing lenses, but what he has up here is he has a paper roll film back, and attached to it in the front is a Fresnel lens rig, which I thought was kind of cool. That's a very ingenious idea. And then, again in 1999, more thoughts on film counters, and he's gone back to thinking about using an electrical system. There's two metal rollers that the paper rolls around, and then there is a hole in the paper backing, and there's a metal spring-loaded roller on either side that makes contact through the metal, and that's what the circuit is completed by to light the LED to tell you that you're in the right position for the next shot. Again, it seems to me kind of overly complicated, but hey, it's an interesting sketch, right? And then the final sketch in this book about this was in 1999 also. He calls this a 4-inch thick reel camera. And so it looks like he's using large spools. They look like 3-inch outside diameter, and they're wide enough apart that the film exposure area is on the inside between them, a pinhole or a Fresnel lens. And then he just has some kind of detail on how the spools rotate. It looks like he's using some kind of hardware bolts going through the spool axis that acts like a bushing. And he has a little detail about using a wooden knob on top with a bolt, threaded rod, and some nuts to rotate it through the camera without fogging it. So the thing about this particular sketch is I found evidence that he actually built this camera, but I can't find the camera. Let me show you that. So I find this to be one of the most interesting documents in his whole collection here. This is what he calls an operation manual. And it looks like a very low resolution photograph, even like a poor digital print of that box camera with the two reels on it. Let's take a look at some of the other. This camera makes square negatives onto a 4-inch wide strip of photo paper. In the darkroom, 8 by 10 inch sheets are cut into 4-inch wide pieces. Each piece will hold 2 images. The pieces are taped together into one long strip of film. Each 8 by 10 sheet will yield 4 images. The camera holds enough paper for 24 images or 6 sheets of paper. Wow. Removing the lid, you unscrew the wooden knobs on the side. Wow, this is actually interesting. You remove the lid. There's a red viewing window for looking at the frame numbers built into the lid, and this is the black paper strip with the film numbers on it. I don't know if you can see that very well, but anyways, let's go to the next page here. Loading the film, so you have to pull the the loose paper rollout, so you have access to the front side of them, and then you have to cut the paper, the photo paper, into these 4-inch wide strips in the darkroom, and using masking tape, tape them together in the back, and then you put them on the inside of the paper, load them on the inside of the backing strip, and then load it up into the camera. And there it is with the back off, ready to go. You can see one of the joints of tape on the back, on the black paper backing roll. Here's the number 1 label for the first image, and this is with the camera back reattached. There's a red viewing window on the back of the box where you can see the numbers, and you put the knobs back on the back to secure it, and there it is, ready to go. And you can put a little, so this is the top view of the camera. These are the 2 knobs for turning the reels, and then there is a little pull shutter for opening the shutter of the pinhole camera. And now this is interesting. Making prints. He's saying you can either scan them and make computer prints, or you can contact print them in the darkroom. And this picture right here is very interesting because I've found that picture. Let me show it to you. But I believe this right here is photographs from that camera. This is a homemade book. It's made of wood that's screwed together. The pages are screwed together with these wooden strips and brass hardware. And there's a sleeve type lid that pulls out. But there's actually a photograph here. Somebody sitting in a chair. And this is called Wings of Fire. This book is. And he's using parchment paper, some kind of vellum paper, I guess. And so it looks like it's the model airplane flying field out on the west side of Albuquerque somewhere. And these were all taken with that large sized roll film camera. And he has kind of a poetic essay he wrote about the model airplane flying field he used to go to, apparently. So I'm unearthing a little bit of background history on this guy. I think it's important to have that, to understand your opponent. Oh, look at that, isn't that cool? This camera, I don't know what happened to it. It's not in, there's no evidence that it exists anymore, but it really took good pictures. And these are all wonderful black and white contact prints. And I can see having the roll film concept where you have a number, like I think that camera held up to 24 images in one go. And that's incredible that you could have that many images. This is, it looks like old guys sitting in the lawn chairs watching the model airplanes fly. And here is, again, I like the vignetting. I like the way the camera kind of darkens around the edges and corners. It really gives it a look at the way the text on this vellum paper, you can see the image through the back side of the poem. But 2 old guys sitting there on their chairs watching the model airplanes fly. Here's a dreamy bird of the air sitting on the tarmac. Here's ghosty images of model airplane guys working on their planes in the pits. And it's very interesting work. And the last, is it the last image? Yeah, the last image in the book is an empty lawn chair. And some kind of a mysterious cloud up there. So this is pretty impressive work from a simple box camera using a roll of black and white photo paper. Well, this is the very first roll film camera that he ever made from my evidence. This is the left side of the camera. Here's the top of the camera. You have the lid that takes off the back. You have the 2 knobs for turning the paper, and then over here is the shutter. And so let me show you the front of the camera. So the front of the camera has this piece of plywood, a thin model plywood that's a pull shutter. Underneath it you can see the little pinhole, and it looks like it's made of aluminum from what I can tell. But what's interesting is he has this other notch or slot system in front of the shutter, and I'm guessing it looks like it's sized for those little colored gel filters that you use in black and white printing. So he must have been interested in filtering the light for these paper negatives. But let's look and see how this works. Okay, yeah, so the back of the camera, the back of the lid, there is a red window. So this is the red window on the back lid of the camera, and there's a number 1 visible. I can turn the knob and you kind of see the number 1 maybe appear or disappear. But if I take off the lid, you're going to see that there is this strip of black plastic with these frame numbers on it. And the black plastic appears to be the kind of plastic that is made, that makes up those black envelopes for storing black and white photo paper. When you buy a box of black and white photo paper, it comes in these black bags, and that's what this looks like it was made of. So let me open up the camera some more. So if you pull out enough paper, you see there's frame number 2, and apparently he joins together the sections of plastic with gaffer's tape. But if you pull out enough paper and fold it around, what you have in here is there's 2 side pieces of black plywood. If I can get them out, I'll get one of them out here. And they go down into these slots in the camera, and it protects the paper roll from being fogged by the pinhole. There's one on each side here. You can see the pinhole down in the middle there. And if I take this one out again, it's a rather tight fit. Down inside there is one of the reels. I'm going to have to increase the exposure on the camera so you can see it. So this right here is inside the camera. There is a dowel down in the bottom of it, and you can turn the knob and it turns the dowel, and the strip of plastic is just taped around that dowel. And there's one on the other side here as well, behind the baffle plate. So the baffle plate is held in place by these, you can't see it now, but there's these blocks. There's wooden blocks with little slots right there. That's where the baffle plate slides into. So let me roll that in there like that. So the baffle plate goes in the little slot, oops, like that. And he does all this in the darkroom, I guess. And then that protects the roll of paper from being fogged by the view of the pinhole. So if we roll the paper back onto the spool, then once he has it loaded up, you can go from 1 to 2 right there, right? And advance it after every exposure. It should be number 3 coming up, unless I missed it. There's 3 right there. So that's the paper roll film camera of Agent 51. The very first version of this roll film camera he made, it wasn't that one with the big wide spools, but he never had any sketches that I could find of this first camera. But he has, so these are the very first paper negatives, and these are dated in July of 1994. So his earliest sketches that I could find were later in 1994, so these are really early. These are paper negatives, nothing really special. Now, we get into something really interesting here. This is in 1994. There's a paper negative right here that's labeled Central and 5th Street. And it looks to me kind of like a one of those orange traffic barrels What's interesting about this paper negative is it's not actually shot on glossy paper. It's shot on more of a matte finish or luster finish paper. It's resin coated luster finish paper. But here's what I've been able to unearth, and you guys are going to get a kick out of this, I hope. But this paper negative right here, I found a print, and here is the print. And what's so cool about this, I've never seen anyone do this, but this is one of these plastic CD cases. And what he's done is he's mounted this silver gelatin fiber-based contact print into this case. And on the back of it, he has a document that describes about the print itself. And then there's the title and the date. It says Central and Fifth, circa 1994. So this is like a whole framed kind of an image done with a contact print of a pinhole camera image. It's a very, very cool seeing a print like that actually of his actually framed. This is called Church, 1994. And that's a very cool image, actually. Very cool image. So a couple more images from this camera. This is a paper negative. It looks like there's some scratches on it. I don't know if that occurs in the camera when it rolls around, but it says at the center of the universe. So apparently Agent 51 has been at the center of the universe. I'm not really sure what that is, but when you look at the contact print, it's some kind of a sculpture, like a concrete thing. Very interesting. So he has this way of contact printing these paper negatives. This one is called Toltec Path, 1991. And this one is interesting. This is UNM bicycle rack. And it's apparently looking down on the ground level, looking at bicycle through the bicycle wheels and the spokes of a bicycle rack at the university. This again is 1994, and it says Amtrak Albuquerque. So this must be the local train station in Albuquerque. And what you have is a it looks like the Amtrak train, and there's people there in front of it, but they're real blurry because they're moving. So this is like a lot of ghosty motion blur. And then there's another one here of the train and just one ghosty person. So I have yet another piece of evidence, and that is a homemade book that was made apparently by Agent 51. And the opening shot, this is an actual contact print that's been heat sealed to the page, but this is that same orange traffic barrel image downtown Albuquerque, 1994, but he actually contact printed the entire negative, including the words that he wrote in pen, so they're kind of backwards in light. But that's kind of a cool image. And then he has some images in this book aren't from this camera, but what he has is that same Amtrak with the ghosty passengers along the side there. Isn't that cool? And then he has some pictures of some of the cameras shot with other pinhole cameras. This one you might recognize from my last report. This is the big oak falling plate box camera. And then we have a couple of pages later, he has a little essay written, and he has this camera, the little roll film camera, taken with another pinhole camera. One other image I had to share with you from that missing roll film camera was this image. This is a contact print. This is a empty chair sitting out in the sun. I was very excited about finding this new camera design of Agent 51's, this paper roll film idea. And although we could only find one sample of the actual camera being built, we do have evidence for there was two of them. Now this early one, this first camera, it uses really small diameter dowels as the spindles for the paper, and it's evident that there were some problems he had with that, because the paper had to wrap itself so tightly around those thin dowels that the paper was curled or bent really badly. And we saw at least one paper negative that looked like it had evidence of being damaged because of that. And I suspect that's why there were so many sketches in his subsequent books about using a larger diameter reel. I suspect he was using something like PVC pipe, pieces of plastic PVC pipe as those reels. But it was evident he was thinking about wrapping them in such a way that they didn't curl so badly. And it's too bad we don't have evidence of that actual camera directly. I mean, we know he built it. We have the instruction manual that had photographs, and we have the book of photographs for that were made with that camera. But anyways, it's a very interesting idea, and maybe this report out to you might inspire you to try to do your own research and see if you can come up with a similar kind of a paper roll film pinhole camera. Until my next report, stay safe and watch your back.